Hi, Business Math. Today we're moving on to Chapter 5, which is an entire chapter dedicated to loans. Section 1 is on promissory notes, and it starts on page 170 in your textbook. Our first term that we need to understand is interest-bearing promissory notes. It's a note that requires you to pay interest. So let's look at a promissory note. Well, that is a written promise or an IOU that you will repay to a lender by a certain date. Okay, some key points to know about promissory notes. You have to pay interest for using the lender's money. The note that requires you to pay interest is called an interest-bearing note, which we just defined above. Lenders may require a borrower to deposit or pledge property as security for a loan, which is called collateral. If a loan is not repaid, the lender can seize the collateral and sell it to recover the borrowed money. So this is very dangerous because if you're going to promise to pay something and you put up collateral, you don't pay that loan back, they can come take it. Okay? Many lenders offer home equity loans to homeowners. Home equity is the difference between what the home could be sold for and what is owed on it. Okay? So say you have an appraiser come out and he appraises your home for a lot of money, $300,000, and what it's worth, and then you sell it for a lot more than that, then that's equity. All right, below is an example of a promissory note, and we have to fill in some blanks here. Most of them don't look like this today. They're basically just a sheet of paper with all the information. They all look different. Okay, so this is just a generic way to present this to you. So here's our amount that we're going to borrow, and that is called our principal. This is not a new term. We've heard this before when we had our chapter on interest. Okay, so principal is the amount that we borrow, and this one is going to be paid back in 2 years, so that is your time. This line is pointing to Prairie Bank, and they are the lender of the loan. This is the date of the note, May 8th, 2010. So this is date of the note. Down here, we have this line pointing to May 8th, 2012. So this is our due date or maturity date. You might hear it both ways. And then our last term, this line, interest of 10%. So this is our interest here, our interest rate. The total amount of money that must be paid on the due date is called the maturity value. And you have something missing here. We need to figure out how that is calculated. This is our formula. So our maturity value we'll label with MV, equals our principal, P, remember we always use P for principal, plus our interest. Okay, let's go to the next page of notes. Okay, to calculate interest on a note, you use the same formula as you use to calculate simple interest paid on savings accounts. And we learned that back in chapter 2. Okay, so our interest equals principal times rate times time. And here's our general formula. I equals P times R times T. And you can also write it as I equals PRT. Okay. Remember, multiplication, you can just jam your variables right together. All right, let's do some examples calculating interest and maturity values. Example A, Leslie Regis borrowed $2,500 from her bank to pay for a cruise. Leslie signed a 6-month promissory note at 11% interest. Find the amount of interest Leslie must pay. Then find the total amount she must repay to her bank when the note is due. Again, I'm going to write down my formula. We're trying to find interest here, okay? And then we're going to try to find the maturity value. So I'm going to write my formulas off to the side. Now I'm going to substitute in to these formulas. And you can just go back to the scenario problem. This is our principal, the amount we're borrowing. 6 months is our time, and 11% is our rate. So let's write this as 2,500 parenthesis our rate as a decimal, 0.11, and our time as a fraction. 6 out of how many months in a year? 6 out of 12. We can do this calculation in our calculator, and when we do that, we get $137.50. Now that I know my interest, I can then substitute into this formula and get my maturity value, the amount due on the due date in 6 months from the time she took the loan. So we start with our principal, 2,500, plus our interest that we just calculated. So our maturity value here is going to be $2,637.50 that she's going to have to repay in 6 months' time. Let's look at example B. Raynon Beelan borrowed $3,500 for 18 months from his bank to have his house repainted. Raynon signed a promissory note that carried a 12% interest. Find the amount of interest Raynon must pay, then find the total amount he must repay to his bank on the due date. So same steps. You should pause the video, try to do this on your own, and then check your work. Okay, so interest is going to be calculated by the principal amount, $3,500, times the rate of 12%, 0.12, times 18 out of 12. You can just leave them as fractions and just do this calculation in your calculators. If you don't have a scientific calculator like mine, I'm going to show you how to do this with your calculators that you have. Use parentheses, 0.12, another parenthesis. Okay, so we're going to type in 18, and then instead of a fraction bar, you can just hit the division key, put your 12 in, close your parentheses. If you have a blue calculator, which everybody should, and that's how you get your answer. Okay, so if you don't have the calculator function, or this could be faster. All right, so our interest here is $630. Now we'll calculate the maturity rate or maturity value. Principal was $3,500 plus the interest we just calculated. So the maturity value on this one will be $4,130 due in 18 months' time. Okay, sometimes the lenders will do exact interest method. So this is interest based on exact time and on a 365-day year. So if you see problems that say exact, or if they give you a number of days, let's say, for example, here's an example. I say I'm going to take a short loan for 120 days. So when I calculate my interest, it would be 120 over 365. Okay, that's just one example. The government loans that students get for college loans, they use this a lot, as so do other businesses and such. Okay, let's look at example C. Anna Lopez borrows $5,000 for 75 days at 8% interest. Find out how much interest she must pay on the loan and how much will be due at maturity. Now, it doesn't come right out and tell you to say exact or to use exact interest method. But when they give you 75 days, if it's not a month or a year amount, and they give you a number of days, you know you're going to be using the exact interest method. So let's calculate our interest by PRT. So interest equals 5,000 times my rate of 0.08. Now here's where it gets different. It's 75 divided by 365. And I'll show you that again in the calculator. 5,000, parenthesis 0.08, close, parenthesis 75 divided by 365. Close parenthesis, hit enter, and it's $82 and remember to round 19 cents. But they want the amount due at maturity, so we're going to do the maturity value. We're going to add 5,000 plus 82.19. So our maturity value is $5,082.19. And let's turn the page. We're going to look at example D now. It's another one of these exact interest problems. Albert O'Malley, signs a promissory note for $3,500 for 150 days at 9% exact interest. Find the interest he must pay and the total amount due on the due date. Okay, so let's write down interest equals PRT. His interest is going to be equal to 3,500 times the rate of 0.09 times 150 divided by 365. I've already calculated this one, and it's $129.45. And then let's do the maturity value, principal plus interest. So 3,500 plus 129.45. So we get $3,629.45. Okay, the last skill concept we're going to learn today is calculating the rate of interest. If you know the principal, the amount of interest, and the time, you can solve for the interest rate using the simple interest formula. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to maneuver this formula around. So I'm going to show you how you can manipulate formulas to isolate a variable. Well, we see multiplication occurring with these three values. I don't know my rate, so I want to get the rate by itself, isolated. So think about opposite operations here. If we see multiplication, we can divide by the principal and the time to get R by itself. What I do to one side, I must do to the other side of this equation. Okay? So these values over here cancel. So this leaves me with rate equals interest divided by the principal and the time. Okay? So all we've done is we've taken our general formula for interest and we've manipulated it to find a missing value. And that should be relatively easy for people to do because you've all had algebra. It's just an algebraic skill. So let's apply this. Example E. Trish Newcomb must pay $320 in interest on a promissory note for $8,000 due 4 months from the date of the note. Find the rate of interest she will pay. The best thing you could do is write your formula down that we just created up here. Rate equals interest divided by principal times time. Since rate is our missing, we're going to write down the values that we know. The interest they said that she's going to pay is $320. The principal was $8,000. And the time is 4 months. So we're going to put 4 divided by 12 because it's 4 out of 12 months. Okay, now we're simply going to set up our formula by substitution. Interest goes on top, 320. Now here's where it gets tricky. If you're using a calculator here, let's use parentheses. 8,000 times 4 over 12. And I'm going to show you this in the calculator. I'm going to hit divide by button. I'm going to use my parentheses here. 8,000 times, and then again, I'm going to use parentheses, 4 divided by 12, close parenthesis, and I get 11.25. So 11% there. Okay, let's do the next one. I'm just checking something real quick. Oh, I know what I did wrong. Okay, let's look at example F. Susilo Wahudi paid $450 in interest on a 3-month note for $12,000. Find the rate of interest he paid. Okay, so rate of interest, we don't know it. We're going to write down our formula. I equals P times T, or I divided by P times T. Write down these knowns. We know the interest he's going to pay is $450. The principal is $12,000, and it's for a time period of 3 out of 12 months. So let's just substitute in. Okay, so far I'm typing that in my calculator. I'm doing 450 divide by button, parentheses, 12,000 times, and then I did my alpha y equals 3 over 12, close it, close parenthesis. And I get 0.15. Remember, that's just the decimal representation. Multiply by 100 to get your percentage, 15%. And I want to go back to this problem right here because I think I did an error of some sort. Let's try this again. 320 divide by 8,000. Yeah, I made a mistake somewhere. So this should be 12%. I knew that didn't seem right. Okay, so we've done 3 different skill sets. Okay, so we've calculated our interest and our maturity value, and then we found our missing rate. Okay, so those are the 3 different problems that you will do on the homework, which is right here, lesson 5-1, practice promissory notes. Okay, it looks like this. All right. Have a good day.